So how many Brits have been prosecuted for helping a relative commit suicide abroad? The answer is 0.
That's right. Nobody so far has been prosecuted for helping their loved ones die abroad. 8 cases have been investigated by the police. All were eventually dropped. First, though, do those who help loved ones to die need protection under the law? At present, those who do help loved ones to die, perhaps by taking them to the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland, could be prosecuted under the law, and they could serve as much as 14 years hard time. That has not happened. Nevertheless, MS sufferer Debbie Purdy wants the law lords to clarify the situation, to change this grey area of the law to something that is clear, something that's black and white. Now, traditionally, our lawmakers have resisted such demands because they're reluctant to be seen to be paving the way for legalised euthanasia. It's a parliamentary matter, they say. Probably quite rightly. Debbie, though, wants the courts to guarantee her husband won't be prosecuted if he does help her travel to the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland, where she wants to die. The courts have thus far refused her request, albeit in the most sympathetic fashion. Debbie argues if there was a risk he'd face prosecution, then she might be forced to end her own life earlier than planned, while she was still capable of doing it without his help. And in order to ensure he wouldn't be arrested, she would choose to die alone, without her husband there to comfort her. Now, I admire Debbie's efforts enormously, I really do, and I can also understand truly why the legal eagles are so reluctant to write something in stone. At present, it's left to the CPS and the police to deal with this kind of case, and it strikes me that they've done a brilliant job so far. They've been sympathetic. So far, as we've heard, not a single person who's taken a loved one to that Dignitas clinic has been prosecuted, either due to lack of evidence or because it wasn't in the public interest to do so. So what do you say? Do we need to change the law to effectively legalise assisted suicide, or would you say, Janet, it's better to leave it as a grey area?
I think there's a happy medium, actually, because I think the trouble is with one big law is that it's very inflexible, and then every examination of it afterwards costs a lot of money and a lot of grief. But I don't see why this can't be done on a case-by-case basis, because after all, she knows she is dying, Debbie Purdy, and her last months, whatever they are, with her husband would be greatly alleviated.
That's kind of is how it is done, is on a case-by-case basis.
But I mean beforehand, so that she would receive an assurance now that he wasn't going to be prosecuted, because everybody involved would be interviewed and everybody would know that, you know, that was her choice. I mean, actually, I'm in favour of it happening here, because the idea of trekking off to Switzerland to a featureless room is pretty
that's the
horrible.
bigger picture,
but
yes,
but I do think that, you know, it would alleviate a lot of her suffering now, to be told now that he wasn't going to be prosecuted.
You can imagine what the difficulty would be. For example, there was a case not so long ago where a woman who was seriously ill overdosed. Her husband returned, found that she hadn't died. She put a bag over her head to suffocate herself, but couldn't tie it. He tied it, and as a result was, I think, investigated by the police, but I think it was subsequently... No, he got a suspended sentence, if I remember right. So if you say to somebody, yes, you know, we won't prosecute you if your partner dies, can you be certain, if you give that assurance, that there wouldn't be anything untoward further down the line? You can't give that assurance in advance. You can,
because after all, it is still your choice, and I think you're then giving the responsibility to your loved ones to carry out your actions. I mean, that is effectively what you're doing, because she won't be in a position to do it herself. And given that this is an horrendous choice, and given that all of us will always say, oh, don't let that happen to me, give me the pill before it's up, at what point is my question, always, because it's very difficult to tell. And these people have made a conscious decision.
George, what do you think?
I mean, I think that story that you've just told is pretty horrendous, actually. I mean, that's really horrific.
Because under the law, the act of tying that plastic bag is moving towards euthanasia rather than assisted suicide.
I understand that, but I just don't think anybody should even be in the position to even have to contemplate that. I think it's all about choice, and I think it's about dying with dignity.
But you can appreciate that from the law lord's perspective.
Yeah, I do.
Every time we inch towards euthanasia, it throws up so many issues.
Well, it does. I mean, I remember when I was 14, 15, doing religious education, where I think one of our terms was all about euthanasia. And no one got to the bottom of it, you know, weeks and weeks of discussion.
Well, that's the
problem. And I don't think we ever will, to be honest. It's that difficult. That's why the way it stands now is probably all right, because no one's being prosecuted for doing this. But what I hate about it is the fact that these incredibly brave people, I think, have got to fly off to Switzerland and other parts of the world, away from home, away from their loved ones, to protect their loved ones, to basically sacrifice their life. And you shouldn't do that. You should be able to do it at home.
That's when we roll into the bigger discussion about assisted suicide and euthanasia for argument's sake, for this discussion, for what Debbie Purdy is after. It is simply about whether we need to make things clear in law. I'm going to come to you in a second, Stephen, if you forgive me, because we've got so many calls. Kirsty, what do people have to say?
Renee's 77, and she's actually asked friends to take her over to Switzerland.
OK, Renee, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So do we need a change in the law, or do you think the status quo, with the CPS being quite sympathetic, is the way to continue?
Matthew, the great difficulty is I'm a widow. I'm perfectly all right now, but one never knows what's in the future. What happens if it's not relatives and it's just two very close friends? This puts a completely different complexion on the whole thing of assisted suicide. So far, it's only been husbands or wives.
That's true.
You know, and if the law isn't regulated to make it all right for me, let's say, to have assisted suicide at home, I might shorten my life by 2 months even by having to fly to Switzerland.
This is Debbie Purdy's argument. Without that clarity, she would feel compelled to go and act on her own, and that would mean finishing her life earlier than she would otherwise choose.
Yes,
But then, Renee, you have to balance that out with the fact that if the law lords start changing the law, we then open the door to a discussion on euthanasia, which regular viewers know I'm very much in favour of, but it's a big debate. It's a huge debate. And it's a parliamentary matter, I would suggest, not a matter for the law lords alone.
Matthew, I agree with you. It's a huge debate, but doctors are already making us live much longer than our sell-by date. In the old days, one died happily of pneumonia. Now one's kept alive regardless of the quality of one's life. So there's so many arguments before one has euthanasia. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Before we came on air, we were all sitting in the green room having a cup of coffee, having exactly that conversation. Yeah. You've thrown it into sharp relief. Debbie Purdy's looking for clarity for her. I think she's also looking for the door to be open to the big debate on euthanasia. It's down to our MPs, and obviously they've had other things to worry about of late. Renee, thank you for the call. Kirsty, let's have another.
Carol, and she's online too.
Carol, good morning.
Morning. I have slightly changed my opinion on this. I was all for a law change due to the fact my perspective was thinking of the person who's dying, so they could sort of die in peace, knowing that their relatives are not going to be prosecuted. Yeah. But my daughter has just phoned me, who's watching your show at university, and she's actually studying law at the moment. And she's done this in depth, and she's saying it should be left as it is now, due to the fact that there has been no prosecutions, and she doesn't think they ever will be.
I don't think they will either.
Sensitive subject.
It's a shame we can't get your daughter on the phone, because what I'd be interested in is whether or not she feels it's time to look at euthanasia to get her MPs to have an open debate.
My daughter has got a firm belief that it should be just left as it is. She says her understanding of it is, if we did open the bigger debate, yes, it works in Switzerland. She doesn't feel, after she's studied numerous cases, it would not work in this country. Just because of the way we are, it would end up being a botched law. It wouldn't be made properly.
Well, I mean, that's why I said it opens the door to a much, much bigger debate.
Yeah.
And I don't see why, if it works in Switzerland, it can't work here. Thank you. And I'm just going to give the last word to Stephen there, because we don't have any more time on this.
Well, I think that what is clarity, because every single situation is going to be very, very different. So if you actually put this in law, then that's going to have so many different repercussions to different people around the world.
I think it's about 800-odd people want to go to Dignitas at the moment. I think what Debbie is asking for is clarity for every single relative that takes someone to that clinic in Switzerland should know that they're not going to be prosecuted. I think they can pretty much rely on the CPS to take the view that they won't be prosecuted, but until it's clear in law.
Well, the facts so far have suggested that people will be investigated, and common sense hopefully will prevail.
OK. Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there for now. I think the euthanasia debate, that's the one we really want to have, but it's down to our MPs to choose that. Guys, I just want to wrap things up, because if you're watching yesterday, you know we were talking about assisted suicide, the right to die, and the case of Debbie Purdy. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say we had an email from Debbie arrive after the show. It's quite long. We're going to ask Debbie and see if we can put it up on the internet so you can read it in its entirety on our Facebook page. But just to give you a quick abridged version, just got back from London, watched the last bit of the show. Thank you for covering our case this morning. The support from people I respect so much is great. And then she points out regarding the Dignitas Clinic, although only 8 cases have been referred to the CPS, lots of cases have been investigated by the police, some more thoroughly than others. 1 arrest has been made. British law should never be a postcode lottery. That I agree with 100%. She goes on to talk about the Suicide Act, saying that it's out of date, it's 1961, it needs to be brought up to speed. She wraps it up with, as always, I'm grateful for the support the Right Stuff gives to a proper discussion on this issue. The interest of the media has made this campaign much clearer for many. And P.S. At the weekend, The Times announced that Dignitas had over 800 British members. If 2 people were to plan to accompany each member to the Swiss clinic, that's 2,400 people who wouldn't know whether or not they would be prosecuted. And that is a very salient point indeed. Glad to have you with us watching the show, Debbie. Appreciate it.